My name is Stan Baines, and I am your chair of this session and steering committee member of the Canadian Network for Imagination and Creativity, or CNIC for short. My fellow creative imaginatives in our steering committee with us this evening are scattered about on your Zoom screen, so if you could, everybody, just give us a wave. Perfect. We are excited once again to be back in this hour-long gathering place and share with you our different topics from our hosts and guests and the discussions that happen with you afterwards. CNIC's goal is to create and foster open, forward-thinking dialogue as we look at things from different angles, look to find new innovative ideas, see creativity and imagination from different backgrounds, perspectives, ask questions, and explore. It is our hope to expand our minds in new directions, collaborate through idea sharing, create partnerships in our differences, in our sameness, and in our beliefs. Let us find creativity through the exploration of our imagination and ideas. As a resident of Clarence, Rockland, Ontario, which sits just outside of the east end of the city of Ottawa in Ontario, Canada, I would like to acknowledge at this time that I am chairing our meeting on traditional unceded land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe territory and people. Our time yesterday was filled with wrongs and hurt. Our time now is for healing, so our moments tomorrow are for togetherness. This is a space to learn, explore, and share. We want you to do that in your way to make this idea space your own. Not only do we want to hear your ideas and thoughts, but listening is equally as important. Reflect and participate in your way. Our format is simple. Once our hosts guide our discussions for this evening, we will open the floor for our chats and conversations to begin and see where the journey leads us during our time together. Zoom obviously is our platform for this discussion, so Zoom allows you to participate in many different ways. It has built-in controls that allow you to raise your hand so we can see you when you wish to join the conversation. And as mentioned earlier, you can add things to our chat function as well, which helps keep the ideas and thoughts flowing. Share your ideas your way and join in the jam. Thank you as always for letting me ramble on during our intro, so let's get down to the fun part of the evening. For tonight's jam, we will be guided by Jacqueline Lawrence and her special guest. We will be talking about creative collectives, transforming people and organizations. Jackie, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Stan, and good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to be joined in conversation this evening by Kweku Aacht. He is a Ghanaian artist born in the UK and raised by a white working class English and Irish couple. He creates cutting edge soundtracks for dance theater companies, facilitates brave spaces for essential and often uncomfortable conversations, and holds space for executives and leaders in the possibility of purpose, creativity, well being, and fulfillment. He is the founder of AWO World Limited and the creator of The Source. Welcome, Kweku. I am so excited that you're here. So we're going to dive into a conversation on creative collectives transforming people and organizations. But before that, even before we started this conversation, there was a conversation in the waiting room around your origin of stories. And I know there's some intentionality in the way that you began your introduction, a Ghanaian artist born in the UK and raised by a white working class English and Irish couple. So, how has your origin story shaped your creative passions and pursuits?
Thanks so much, Jacqueline. Wow. I mean, I think to begin with, my experience of being other than has really given me my superpowers. And so growing up in Kent, in the south of England, my parents worked on the hop fields. So really from the age of 3, it was a very rural existence for me. And being the only Black boy in the village, I quickly developed a lot of skills around how to navigate and create relationship. And I believe the entertainer came alive then. And I very much was able to, I kind of call myself a shapeshifter. So I was able to kind of really get into different roles and create in ways that had me get on with just about everybody almost instantly. And that's really influenced who I've become, really. the strategies and the kind of, I think the kind of survival thing later transformed into a very conscious way of being, which I use to create art, performance art, which I use to understand people's stories and listen deeply for ideas and content and narrative, and also to be able to reflect the human condition.
Mm. As you're speaking, I got very clear that I found my voice through poetry. And so the performing arts for you seemed to have been a space that your artistic expression was authenticating your own voice, consciously or unconsciously, through your memories of your origin stories. Now, how did those stories trigger for you, like your desire to be heard, or temper your fears around relevance?
Yeah, I mean, the story is quite, I mean, someone mentioned the idea of comedy, and I think that actually could work so well because there is, I think that the more I developed the ability to find humor in my journey, the stronger it made me and enabled me to be more flexible with who I am. And my mom, being a Fanti woman from Ghana, my dad also from the same, their parents were from the same town. And my dad was a marine engineer. He'd come over to the UK and he brought my mum over to get the experience of being in the UK. I think there was a love interest for a while then, and they had an affair. So my dad quickly went off back to his family in Ghana, leaving my mum in Liverpool at the time with me. And you know, sadly, she experienced a mental health condition, which meant that she couldn't connect with me and looked for a family for me to be part of. And that journey, I think, in terms of going through that experience of being disconnected and then finding connection, but the person I'm connecting to looking very different and the community looking very different. You know, I believe that is, you know, really at the root of, you know, the way I communicate, the way I connect, and the way I create.
Mm. Well, let's talk about the connection that we started just as COVID started. Because we have a mutual friend, Oren Saunders, who shared with me, I think a couple of weeks into COVID, that, oh, there's this, you know, group of creatives from around the world that gathers on Saturday mornings for an amazing conversation. And he thought, this is your kind of stuff. And from the moment I entered that Zoom room, the energy in that space was just, I knew I'd found my tribe and I knew this was my home. Because this was the most unique group of eccentric people I'd ever seen come together in terms of people who were visionaries, creatives, poeticians, healers, change makers. So tell us about the amazing collective that's called AWO and how that came to be.
Well, AWO is home. That's our mantra. And AWO came strongly through, this iteration of AWO came strongly through my collaboration with our other mutual friend, Olubode Sean Brown, who, through his philosophy of blooming, which is an elemental way of looking at life, which comes from the Dagra people of Burkina Faso and northern Ghana, really showing you that if you use the elements holistically, it's a way of ensuring your life is also holistic. And that is really what I kind of ran my kind of vision for a circle of people I could create with through that kind of methodology, and came up with this reality that I had been in search for home. It was an experience that was familiar to me, and it actually was my vision. I wanted everybody to experience home. So AWO became that. And you stepped right into the quite early on. And we're a testimony to that. And so we really looked at kind of what were the components that were home for me. And that was including boundaries. An Irish mom knows about boundaries, right? So I wasn't about kind of, you know, having some kind of very fairy tale space, but actually one with clear boundaries, clear ways of communicating, clear edges, but also so much love and acceptance. My mom's door was always open. Our door was always open. And the way I look back, I think people thought it was dangerous and all of that. And I've kept that. My wife is sometimes a bit sort of like, who are these people in the house? You know, like, yeah, there's some creatives that kind of came by and, you know, and that really has been how I've walked into corporate rooms, how I've walked into theatre spaces, how I've walked into art galleries, you know, with that same kind of thing of kind of, I wonder who's going to be there. And I wonder what their story is. And I wonder what they need in order to feel at home and to create. And so AWO has 3 pillars. One is wellness and well-being, holistic well-being. One is art, and that includes visual arts and also performance art. And the other one is transformation, leadership, and learning. You know, one of the pillars of who I am is transformation, leadership, and learning. And my background, the area I'm most qualified in is experiential learning, which, you know, I was qualified to do since 2003. And that is really the underpinning or the sort of bedrock of all the other elements that that kind of, in a professional setting or a corporate setting, that stack on top. Of course, predating that is performance art.
Well, we're going to get into that a little bit later, but what I want to just go back to is this part about AWO, because one of the things that I could say about that space when I got into it was that this was a place that I could very much be adventurous and dance with the changes that were happening in society, or globally, I should say, with COVID, with the changes that were happening in my own life as I was preparing for a major surgery, and what was happening in the space around me. And so for the first time, I was dancing with change in a way that I had not done before. And I wonder if you can share with us, what are some of the, what have you noticed or what have you heard about from persons about the growth and transformation that have occurred for them based on this amazing space of home that you have created collaboratively?
Yeah, no, thanks, Jacqueline. I mean, you've been so generous at sharing your story, and you know, you represent a particular type of leader who has huge responsibilities at a corporate level, at a, you know, in your work in terms of social change, permeates political spaces, social spaces, you know, and civic space as well. And all those spaces are represented within the collective. We have young people who even come and live with us here in the AWO Hub. And so we've had, for example, Sensabiji, who came to us age 23 from the village. And we exposed him to yoga and fitness and well-being. He's an extraordinarily athletic young man and really smart and wise, and had not really come across any of these ideas. And watching him over 18 months move from, you know, just being curious and open to facilitating movement spaces within a corporate setting, for taking over and covering some of my individual personal trainer sessions with really high-level clients, just show me how extraordinary immersion within a community that cares and that loves and that also is ambitious about change can really impact and influence a young life. Within the, you know, more kind of the people with more access to influence, wellness has been the big story. You know, I learned a lot about wellness through my own injuries as a dancer, and then just through life. You know, I had, you know, a breakdown in my mid-30s. I had a lot of physical injuries, and each time I had a physical injury, I met another amazing practice of alternative health. And those people, some of those people are now inside the circle of AWO, and they have informed and supported and taught me what I now do as a wellness coach for executives. And, you know, the journey for some of the leaders who have huge responsibilities, some Pan-African leaders, some leaders, for example, who now, like Jeanette Bain-Bennett, for example, my good friend, who's the first Black director of Sport England, you know, the stories of transformation around being part of a community that really listens and then having these different forms of holistic wellness modalities and creative modalities that allow for play, that allow for exploration, that allow for adventure, that allow for mistakes, create this, I think, space which, yeah, people have talked about extraordinary change. And definitely I have changed a lot since we first met back
Mm.
in
Oh my goodness.
2021, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think you're touching on it a little bit in terms of what I most appreciate about the space is that I could show up in that space as myself, unedited. Like there's room for all of me, the seeker, the poet, the equity strategist, the immigrant, the diasporan, the whatever it is, the pain that I'm in, the pain that I am, all of it. And by showing up in that space, there was no fear of judgment in that space. And I know you were recently in the UK, in London, and you met with a group of Black leaders in the arts. And why was that meeting so significant for you as you're talking about Jeanette, for example? Why was that meeting so significant as you continue to hold space for executives and leaders in the possibility of purpose, creativity, well-being, and fulfillment, as you said in your bio? In your most recent enterprise collective that you've launched, The Source.
Yeah, I mean, the source has really come from conversation in the AWO space around this era that came up, I think, very much post George Floyd, where huge posts and opportunities in corporate became available for Black leaders who, in varying levels were, up to the job, right? They had huge skills and came from a background within whatever field they were being asked to lead in. However, very quickly it became clear that this happened really quick, really fast, and the infrastructure required to support the development of somebody holding so much were not in place. And quickly the results of that became really evident within the wellness space, with people getting burnout, with people feeling isolation, and also not accessing, their best. So an example of that is a friend of mine whose name is Freddie Opokwade. He's an incredible dance artist and leader in the dance field. He's a contemporary dancer in the UK, and he's the chief executive of Dance Umbrella in the UK. And that organization, his colleagues, some of them had mentored him for years. White colleagues had mentored him for years, so it felt like at least a very welcoming space for him. But then when he showed up at the meetings, for European dance meetings, and for all these international dance festivals, and realized he was the only Black face, and when conversations about Indigenous or Black or ethnic majority artists would come on, everyone would look to him for the solution or the conversation, just very naturally and authentically, without really even considering it. And quite quickly, he realized he was naturally fighting for the needs of any ethnic majority or ethnic different person other than, a white male or white female. And that for him quickly became wearing. And he was just a really powerful example of someone I know who's really comfortable, or not comfortable, but really conversant in that space, having been given that opportunity and now finding himself feeling unwell with the pressure and the stress to have to represent that identity in all those spaces. And so his example was one that I realized that one-to-one work was going to be really important for him to be able to unpack what are the experiences he's having and how he can move that through his body, through conversation, through different healing modalities, even particularly food, and be able to navigate that in a way that he can stay around, sustain, be well, and make a difference in that space. The final piece in that is community. So the source for me was an idea that came from the AWO experience, where we get to invite people, other leaders in his position. And in London, that was actually a set of leaders in the arts. I've also had conversations with leaders in corporate leaders who heal, and leaders who are founders and who are entrepreneurs. And it feels like these are, it's necessary to have individual groups with a very similar or relatable story before bringing together those groups into a bigger group, if at all. And so in London, it was that story around being a Black leader in the arts that we created a space for. And it was a hybrid space. So we had some members in the room and some members on Zoom. And we had a conversation about what are the experiences at the top level in the UK as a Black artist navigating these journeys. And it was powerful. It was really, you know, there were tears, there was a lot of recognition in the space. And one of the things I think is really important is everybody recognized the opportunity, right, that they've been given and that they were standing for. And all and everybody was experiencing a lot of challenge with that opportunity and holding that. So yeah, so that was really a great opportunity that opens, I think, a bigger story.
I so understand that so well. You know, as a Black leader who is also a transformational agent with lived experiences around areas that many of my colleagues do not know or understand fully. I have certainly felt the heat of attention in terms of visibility while experiencing the low value for what I sometimes bring into the space in terms of the way I think, the way I see and do things, and doing it differently. And, you know, I really give AWO some credit around, again, providing that space for me to really merge all of myself and being comfortable with that visibility and value conversation, to embrace it in a different way. You know, you talked about the Bloom cosmology before, and I'm wondering with the source, what is that Afrocentric healing that, because I remember when I first heard the source, I thought of it as having some kind of a connection to that African element and elemental world. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think that is part of it. Absolutely. You know, I just had, when I was having conversations about the C-suite and how that experience was for people, I did wonder, and the conversation was really about how much of yourself can you bring into that room safely, and that it's valued and that can be used. Because, you know, I talk about magic or superpowers or, you know, the essences, and that's where the leadership at that level really comes home. And actually, if I'm in a position where suddenly loads of those elements of me are being switched off, it becomes, you know, almost like doing the 100 meters with a hand tied behind your back. You know, you may be the fastest person in the world, but someone's going to run past. You might even fall on your face, you know? And so, you know, that was really why the source, I wanted to enable people to access and explore everything from ancestral indigenous wisdom, food, community, even visits. You know, some people have come to Ghana and done tours with us and gone through different kind of rites of passage and things, because for them it created a deeper route to work from and an acknowledgement and also a healing. And so, you know, I think it happens in layers. We work from looking at our story, like, so we say mineral is our story, right, in the cosmology, with the elemental model, and really looking at the hurt and the pain that actually is transformed into vision. And then we go into looking in the nature space and air, where we allow the person to play and explore and understand their passions. And that really roots people back to a natural feeling of motivation. You know, people have to drag themselves out of bed in the morning because they've become disconnected to their true passion. When I'm connected to my passion, nobody has to drag me out of bed in the morning. I'm up, I'm ready to go. Then we move into the fire space, and that conversation you just really alluded to, Jacqueline, was visibility and value, collaboration and equity. You know, we hold that space for people to look at, who am I? You know, really, what is my value? And just map it out. You know, we use visual mapping. We can use Tableau work, still freeze frames, we can replay things using drama and applied theatre, and help the person revisit their abilities and their strengths and their foundations and their interrelationship and their story. When we move into water, it's how does all of that come together when we reflect and look at who we're offering that magic to, and we really realize that actually the best or the most powerful gift are often offered to those who can appreciate the story. And that often does transcend race and gender and all the other things. It's so deep. It's actually a needs and emotions level. So that can go way beyond and transcend our and our Black experience, as some people coin it. And then the last level, earth, bringing it to ground and having people really look at, actually in that Irish mom experience of the boundaries of looking at, okay, you've said that you're going to do this. What are the guardrails that are going to hold you on that track and keep you in the trajectory of living out your purpose and being able to achieve in a way that has you well, healthy, and carry away legacy. And so the source takes people through that journey, and physically sometimes tapping back in for those who want to come to Ghana, or otherwise just sharing that indigenous wisdom and having people remember what greatness they come from.
Wow. I can't wait to book my own ticket.
I can't wait
do
for you
a
to
residency program there for a while. But earlier you talked about, you've just given a great demonstration of how you were just weaving that elemental with the creativity and the and getting people to really be transformed. I want to touch a little bit more on your facilitation skills, because when we were speaking the other day, you reminded me that facilitation of conflict was really your grounding. And so can you share a little bit about how you have merged your facilitation and creativity skills to transform personal and professional lives and organizational cultures through those hard, necessary, and courageous conversations that you facilitate?
So, yeah, that session. I got approached by a friend now, I definitely call him a friend now, Gideon, who's doing his PhD over at Bath. And he, as a young man, 15 years ago, had founded a series of different youth leadership organizations. And one had brought me to Ghana to facilitate pre-elections peace building workshops, a whole course actually using the philosophy of Ubuntu. At the time, I was a facilitator on a program with the Tutu Foundation in the UK, and we were using Truth and Reconciliation, the Truth and Reconciliation model, and Ubuntu, I am because we are, the philosophy for managing modern day tension in places like Manchester, where there was gang influence, and Liverpool, where there was a lot of poverty, and Preston, where there were a lot of issues around kind of drugs, sex workers, and issues around territory and things. And so we were looking at how do we support and resource people working in the communities with these different challenges using the indigenous African wisdom of the Bantu people. And Gideon said, wow, can you come to Ghana and do this? And they didn't have money, and Tutu doesn't have money for international work. So I just decided to go. And fast forward 10 years, Gideon reapproached me for a new group of young people and said they're going to be going on that pre-elections trail again. It's 2024. The elections are at the end of this year here in Ghana, and we still have that northern issue with tension and the possibility of recruiting young people to get involved in violent demonstrations and things like that. And so it was a chance for me to do some conflict facilitation for 3 days, and it just had me really in my element. I had forgotten, because I hybridize a lot. And I think that's what you're alluding to. But my foundations come from Ubuntu or Augusto Boal, Theatre of the Oppressed, Argentinian and Mastery. Also Bloom in a contemporary sense with the elemental models, and looking at another South African wisdom from an organization I was trained by, called Leap Confronting Conflict. And they use so much incredible theatre work merged with rites of passage and ritual for young people, and so working with gangs or people in prison. So all of that foundation had me in thousands of conversations in groups, in schools, prisons, youth community. And so now when I step into a very kind of, maybe someone would describe as a toxic corporate setting, all that information and all those experiences are underneath my feet, as it were, and it grounds me in holding space for the possibility that even in a very risk-adverse space, we can find that level of bravery to hold bold conversations that will make a difference to well-being, which is really where I center my work these days. And I've noticed that when we can play, when we can move, when we can open up discussion and really start to give clear boundaries around speaking from I and creating from the idea of looking for the gold rather than looking for what's wrong in what other people are saying, there suddenly becomes a dropping of barriers and of guards. And I have seen amazing conversations. I remember, I don't even need to go into detail, but there's a particular international bank watching a conflict between compliance and a lot of our innovations people in this big bank end up in a great hug fest of tears because myself and a young co-facilitator had allowed them to play this stuff out in role play and see themselves and be able to realize that there's humans on both sides of this experience. It's not about somebody trying to clip somebody else's wings or make other people's job difficult. So yeah, the grounding from the community really supports me in a heavy industry or in high level corporate.
Wow. You know, I so wish you could be here this weekend because tomorrow and Saturday, Scenic is hosting its first live in-person Odyssey in Ottawa under the theme of creativity as a tool for social transformation. And what you just outlined is such a powerful demonstration of that. I want to close this part of our conversation by just exploring this home bit a little bit more because, you know, this sense of being home within oneself is such a, it's such a lost space that many of us have been conditioned out of, whether it's through our families, our churches, our schools, or whatever other conditioning institutions have played a role in our lives. And oftentimes this invitation to go within or to go back home within is, you know, when something happens, you know, you may read a book about something or see a film that's, you know, shifted your perspective on something, or you get a diagnosis or there's a breakup but something invites you to go within. And I want to kind of ask you, with a focus on the soundtrack and the dance collaborations. And I love just how you're totally using all of your skills and your creative energy in so many different ways, but so powerfully at the same time. So with your soundtrack and dance collaborations with theater companies, when did you fall in love with music and dance? And when did they call you home?
Oh, I smile and laugh because it takes me back to Kent. My mom and my dad, my foster mom was quite a music lover. I mean, she loved everything from Motown, Aretha, she would listen to Diana Ross. She would be really listening to a lot of kind of new wave. We had, you know, I think it was 1981, there were still punks in our local village sitting by the church pond, and she would go over to them and chat with them. And so the kind of range of music she listened to first captured me. And while they were working on the field way away from me, I'd be dancing to the radio. And then when I got to my sort of early teens, it was all about MTV, you know, copying Janet and Michael and Madonna, all these different people, and doing the routines for the family with my cousins. And then by 14, I'd started to go out to big parties in Oxfordshire fields, you know, these raves, illegal raves. And partying, and then I became a dancer, a club dancer. And so my commercial career, I was discovered in a club. I auditioned, and that kind of moved me into a more professional space. But I never trained as a dancer. What trained me was the dance floor.
Mm.
But I learned a lot through commercial dance. And then I danced for 5 years before getting injured. And then the music aspect of what I did took over because, of course, I still wanted to interface with the dance communities. And so from 2006, I've been making music for dance theatre. And because of the timeline, 2003 was when I trained in experiential learning, because again, it was a career that would give me more control over my time. I could work shorter hours and then create. And so once I got my legs back and was able to dance again in 2006, 2007, I brought in this facilitative approach into making and into holding space, into producing music. So allowing my teams that I work with to go on a transformational journey together. And some of the dance companies I've actually performed with have benefited or utilized my skills in devising processes to make work, looking at character development, emotions, and all kind of different things. So there's a complete blend that weaves through from the training room onto the dance studio.
Wow. So, folks, I guarantee you're about to ask your questions. I apologize. I was just getting lost in the conversation. But I want to close this segment off with a poem that I wrote that you invited me to create for AWO's 1 year. And it's a love letter to AWO at one. Dear AWO, in less than a year, you have changed many, many lives, and one of them is mine. COVID and cancer connected us. I zoomed in as if on a blind date, no expectations, just to meet fellow creatives and visionaries, just to see how we would get along. It was love at first hello. Your energetic force field hugged me, swaddled me over thousands of miles, welcoming me home. Not my mother's home, not my childhood home, not my ancestral home, but the home within, the home that houses my soul, the home where the creative me connects with the visionary me, to dance with words, to claim choice, to cultivate social change. Little did I know our connection, our community would nurture my healing. You disrobed my conditioned fear to be judged, to regret, calling me to speak more, to collaborate more, to trust, to share my heart, my voice. You disarmed my desire to hide, empowering me, compelling me to step into my own light, to shine. You disturbed the waters, reflecting self-compassion, giving me space to breathe, to breathe, to be. AWO at one, you are oneness, you are one love, you are home. Ladies and gentlemen, your questions, please, for Mr. Kweku Aacht.
First hand I see is Peter.
Oh no, not Peter.
Come on, Peter.
It actually wasn't a hand. I was applauding the poem.
Oh, sorry. Well, Peter, you're up anyway.
I'm up anyway, and I got to ask this. I mean, first of all, I'm just like I'm blown away by everything that you've just said, and I wish you were here with us for this next 2 days for our conference. Boy, that would just be something. And isn't it timely, Jackie, that we would have Kweku on the night before this conference? Wow.
Yes.
Okay, now a really profound question. Whereabouts in Liverpool were you?
Well, I think I mean I was about 2.5 when I left Liverpool.
Okay.
But I know that it was in hospital. It was not far from the hospital I was born in, which was at that time Mill Lane.
Oh my goodness me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. What an amazing journey. I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I will ask you another one. What, and I think I know the answer, but what feeds you? What feeds your soul to keep you going in this way?
That's a great question. it's one that's all that can feed and also can have me, I guess, hide in some way, which is the experience I can have when see Jacqueline speaking that poem. You know, there's something about experiencing the journey of somebody impacted by work that I'm holding that can have me really energized. But my wife will tell you it can also have me avoid responsibility for a whole lot of other things like making money.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
I
So
hope we meet
is
again,
that just the
Kweku.
experience of transformation, like seeing people's stories and hearing people's
Absolutely.
journey.
Yeah. Magic.
Gerard.
Hi, Kweku. I'm just wondering, you mentioned that you kind of call yourself a shapeshifter, and I'm just wondering the kind of working class and in that background. You know, we've seen for generations those of privilege almost creating a wedge between those who are coming from working class backgrounds to those of people of color. And I'm just wondering how much of the working class background that growing up has informed some of the work that you're doing now. And the other thing was that, and maybe even the idea of a kind of how it sounds almost like you're doing almost kind of like creative restoration, bringing people together. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's a powerful question. Yeah, when I think about my experience of growing up, I remember very clearly my dad's hands. He was from Dorset. I always used to think, as I got older and started understanding history, I thought he was somehow Moorish because he had this rich red skin. He was really tall, massive hands. And these hands were chafed and very, very rough. And, he was extremely gentle and calm. And sometimes, anger for him was silence. And that would have me, behave myself. He just need to go silent. And I'm like, I'm doing as I'm told. Anyway, and I just remember wanting to have my hands with that roughness on them because there was something about that made a difference around hard work, graft, and, taking care of business. And that has stuck with me until now. There's something, sometimes I have to really unhook myself from graft because sometimes that's not what's needed. Sometimes we need to have space and we need to relax and we need to, take time out. But that grind, that kind of manual labor and that kind of, piecework approach to life and income, I think has really, really stuck with me. And it's still a quality that I respect in people to this day.
Thank you for that. It's interesting because I think of someone like Henry Giraud, who's a critical writer and actually refers to himself as a working class academic, and some of the conflicts and I think he was last teaching at U of T, if I'm not mistaken, in education, but or I think it was in education, but getting fired from universities in the States for some of his ideas and thoughts, and how much of that working class background. And I also come from a working class background. My father was an acetylene worker, and I would, we'd come home working many hours and really struggled. And I think that's in some ways even informs some of the work I do now in community. But yeah, it's interesting that and I think at one point you mentioned, was it Ferrer or was it Auguste Boll that was because he also did pedagogy of the theater, so sorry, theater of the oppressed.
The oppressed, yeah.
Yeah, so just want to throw that out there too. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love that reflection that you had on your experience. Another one for me has, and which again still needs work, is this conversation about you don't know if you'll live tomorrow. So this idea about how money can be managed, and if there's not enough, it doesn't matter. Kind of just live your life anyway. And so for me, I left London when I went to Ghana with some debts that were just like horrible, and it's taken me a long time to get around that issue. But that very much came. I remember my mom hiding, certain, I think they were self-employed for a while, hiding the tax, letters underneath, in the cupboard, and but just kind of having friends around and getting getting food, a spread together, and baking some cakes and saying, "Sod it," have a cigarette and live your life, and that's definitely still there as well.
Goran, go ahead.
Well, thanks so much for these reflections. This is really beautiful and inspiring. I have a question around the effect of creativity on sort of the perceptions and sort of seeing our world, because so many of us are engaged in this desire of constructing a hopefully more just egalitarian world. And one wonders whether we have really given enough thought around this notion of how creativity transforms us and how it might change how we view the world. Would you like to reflect on that a little bit in your own work?
So thank you so much. It's a blessing, really. I think that's one of the reasons why I love living in Ghana, because I realized that I've finally gotten a place where I can integrate the arts into almost everything I do, and it can be enough. When I was doing that in London, it just kind of fell away, and I found myself grafting in a job and then quickly running back to do some dance work, routines, and then going to my day job. And I think being here, I've realized that you can actually get by on very little, and then spend a lot of time practicing, experimenting, working within, have collaborators within the collective who go into the communities, rural communities, and work with thousands of children. And I just go for 3 or 4 days. The transformations of these 4 days with these 1,000 children are extraordinary. And I think about, goodness, what would it take to do that in the States or do that in London? Do you know what I mean? It'd be so challenging to be able to create that kind of resource to make that happen. So I think that, I get a chance to reflect on those kind of ideas in praxis quite often, even with the residencies we do here, where we have a young person coming on an apprenticeship. It feels like that's a constantly integrated into the work of helping somebody change, and then having them see where they can place their skills in the world for the same kind of adventures and the same kind of intentions. And so I think, again, that project, The Source, is almost offering people a window into that and saying, goodness me, it might feel really disconnected from your day-to-day, where you've got to make the bottom line work with these huge, expectations. But know that you can plug into these kind of methods, modalities, and experiences that are happening around the world.
Thanks so much.
I've got a question. I like the way your mind works. I like how you see the world. Where do you see yourself in 15 years and 20 years? Like, where do you see your arc of your life take you?
Well, one could say I'm a bit of a late bloomer. Me and my wife just had our first child last year, and he's now 8 months old. And he's extraordinary. Probably my biggest professor now, like he's my biggest teacher. And and so, him being 15, I can just imagine that you know, there's definitely going to be, I can see collaboration with him. I can just imagine he's going to have a lot of ideas that are going to be exciting for me, new ways of thinking that are going to challenge my ideas and my kind of what I think the world is about. And I'm up for that. I think I'm up for that challenge of like, what's the next generation about, and how can I use what I've learned to support them as they create a world that their next generation is going to live in. I'd love to be on the continent. I can feel that what's happening out here is so difficult. It's really unstable sometimes, not unstable politically here as much, but in terms of economically and in terms of what people need to do to make their life work. At the same time, the openness, the possibility of newness, I think invites just a different level of space for thought and innovation. And so I think being on the continent, creating globally, inviting more and more collaborators to come down, and also, you know, having, you know, opening my heart more and more to the idea of abundance. One of the working class mentalities I've had throughout my life is, you know, just get by. And I've held that. And even with all the skills I've amassed, it's taken people like Jacqueline to reflect back and say, this is worth money, go and get a paycheck for this, you know. So I see in myself inviting more of that abundance to have the bigger impact on the continent, collaborating globally.
Excellent, thank you.
Welcome, great question, thank you so much.
So we've got about a minute or two left. So Jackie or Kweku, I'll give you guys last thoughts for the evening.
So I just really want to thank Kweku for playing with me this evening.
Your sound has gone down a bit, Jackie.
Oh, sorry. I just want to say thank you to Kweku for playing with me this evening, because this is what happens when Kweku and I get together. We talk and talk and talk, and next thing you know, time has passed. And so this was good. We contained ourselves this evening. But I'm going to leave the last word to you, Kay.
Thank you so much. It's been such a blessing to have this conversation. I think this kind of opportunity to get a window into other creative communities and creative collectives is huge, as a huge blessing. And so I'm excited to hear you've got your event coming up. I hope there's a way that I can get a window into that, and, you know, whether you're going to do some recordings or whether you're going to be live, or, you know, I hope I can see how that unfolds. And definitely in the future, I've never been to Canada, so it'd be great to come and share with you and kind of be on the ground with you all and do something together. That would be amazing. Yeah.
Well, I definitely want to thank you both for a very interesting conversation. This is exactly why we are here. And, you know, this is exactly what our space is for. So thank you, Jacqueline, and thank you, Kweku, for that, for engaging us this evening. And thank you all for joining as well. So we do want you to know that Scenic is socially connected. So check out our website at www.canadiannetworkforimaginationandcreativity.com. That is one long statement in there. We can also be found on Instagram, Facebook, X, and YouTube. Find us online for more information and links to register for our Idea Jams bios, view our past Idea Jam sessions like this one when it comes up online, and the chats and any other helpful information about us on what's coming up. Speaking of which, and Jackie did mention this, our Odyssey of Creativity Conference is happening starting tomorrow. Scenic is going to be having our first ever live experience happening on Friday, April 19th and Saturday, April 20th, right here in Ottawa, Canada. Our event, Odyssey of Creativity, promises to be a social engagement to remember, and we are very excited. So we are looking forward to seeing all of you who have signed up and are joining us tomorrow and on Saturday. And for those of you that can't make it, guaranteed we will be talking about this for a while to come. So we'll make sure to infuse that in our future Idea Jams for sure. As we close for the evening, we thank you again for joining us as always in this past hour. And we look forward, like I said, to seeing some of you tomorrow and on Saturday. Our next Idea Jam, this one is for sure, will be happening in May on May 16th, hosted by Ming Yu Lin, and it's called When the Ugliness Sings. So keep an eye on your emails for the reminder, and please join us again then. And we thank you for watching your emails now for those of you who were here last month to hear me say that we weren't going to be back. So thank you for joining us. On behalf of all of us here at Scenic, we wish you a great night, a wonderful end to your week and the rest of April. We're excited to see you in person this weekend, and we're glad you made time with us as always this evening. We look forward to seeing you again online in May. Have a great evening, everybody, and thank you for coming.
Good night, everyone. Thanks so much.
Good night, everybody.